Hey everybody, how you doing? It's John Brewer here. I just wanted to come at you real fast. We got a real interesting post the other day, and it was a restaurateur asking about tipping for takeout, and some people really had strong opinions about it, and you're not alone. So tip fatigue is a very real thing that's out there right now. I actually read an article the other day. It's right here. It's Modern Restaurant Management. If you're a restaurant out there, you should definitely be subscribing to this. It's free. Some great articles, some great products out there. It's really all stemming from these desktop tablets, basically, you know, where they flip it over and you go ahead and you sign it. Well, it was real easy for them to just add a tipping option in there. And if I'm an employee and I'm working that register, I want the tipping option in there. And as the owner of the restaurant, I want to make my employees happy. Well, it seems like they're not thinking about the consumers enough. The guests, I call them guests, was taught that at a very early age. And it's just a different way of framing the experience, I think. I'm a fan of it, but I digress. Anyway, it gives them the option to go ahead and tip. But a lot of times we feel guilty. We feel like we have to tip. So this article was really interesting. Now, this is also not to be confused with some of the takeout charges, the delivery charges, which your restaurant is not charging you the delivery charge. They're most likely taking a discount on the food, selling it to the Uber Eats or whoever it may be, and then they're charging you a fee. So just to give you a quick primer on that one, basically what happens is anybody, Uber Eats, Delivery Dudes, any one of these third-party deliveries, they are asking for a discount for the food that is being prepared for them to deliver to you. What happens is they add that discount back in, so they're charging you full price, which they're making the difference on, and then they charge you a delivery fee on top of that. So that is how that whole third-party structure works for the most part. There are takeout fees. Now, I understand some of these. The other option would be to just kind of blend it in with everything, but container fees, containers went up, paper products. In order to make something to go, you've got all the containers that need to be used, silverware, napkins, paper products. The labor it takes to put everything together is separate from the labor that's part of the restaurant. So that I can kind of understand too. What I will say in defense of the guests is a lot of these prices got raised during the pandemic because of supply issues, and the same thing has happened with menu items, and now they've started to come down, but just like the gas at the pump, it doesn't seem to come down to the levels it was before, right? I mean, gas right now is $70 to $75 a barrel, but we're still paying $3.50 somewhere in there for our gas. And if you're in California watching this, you probably fell out of your chair when you heard $3.50 because you're probably paying $4.25 or something like that. But anyway, let's get into it. The tipping point. This is called tech tipping causing tension. Half of customers felt manipulated or tricked into leaving a tip at checkout, according to a report by Capterra, which was June 2023. It was conducted to learn more about how the overuse of tablet tip screens is changing the way consumers approach the tipping culture. So here are some insights. Over asking for tips is alienating customers. 50% have felt manipulated or tricked into leaving a tip or tipping more than they intended to. Tipflation, so you've got some tip fatigue, tipflation. There's another one that'll be coming up. Tipflation has changed tipping behavior in restaurants. 77% tip more due to rising costs for workers, while 37% tip less because of rising costs for consumers. So you've got basically 2-to-1. People are tipping more now than they used to, percentage-wise. Restaurants have increased tip expectations. 58% of consumers believe that restaurants have increased their minimum suggested tip. I'm old enough to remember when 15% was your standard tip, 20% was an excellent tip. Now it seems that 30% is an excellent tip and 20% is fairly standard. So that's definitely true, whether it's cultural, whether it's because of the restaurants, whether it's because of the servers, whatever. I don't mind tipping if I'm getting great service. And I kind of look at it as, having been a server and a bartender, I can look around the room and I'm like, okay, if I'm tipping $80 and this guy's got 4 tables and he does 2.5 turns, okay, he's doing all right. He's got to tip out, he's got to tip that guy, he's got to tip them, he's got to tip them. I can peg somebody's income pretty well when I go out to a restaurant. It's just kind of that math that I do, just like the way I always look at ketchups and salt and peppers on the side to see if a restaurant's clean or not. We check these things out do your side work. Anyway, consumers don't expect to tip at QSRs, but are inundated with requests. 82% have seen tip screens at QSRs, but only 11% say tips here should be mandatory. I've noticed that as well. I'm sure you've noticed that. There's always that option to tip out there. And it kind of puts a little pressure on you, especially if the employee is standing right there. And we're going to get into this a little further. There are repercussions because of that, so something to consider for all the restaurant people. The traditional belief that tipping should be limited to table service restaurants, delivery services, salons, and other similar establishments is being challenged by the rise of tip screens at checkout. It's a convenience thing. It's real easy for them to add that option. And you know, if I'm a salon, or if I'm one restaurant and I know that another restaurant is giving that option, I want to give that option as well. They're not thinking about the guest, though. They should be thinking about the consumer more, who might feel a little alienated. And worst comes to worst, they might not come to your restaurant anymore. And we're seeing definitely some blowback in that area. This fundamental disconnect with tipping could erode customer loyalty, what I'm talking about, and lead to financial losses. In order to address this, Capterra says businesses should reassess their POS software, leverage insights to better understand what customers think is appropriate, and use these learnings to customize the shopping experience. So they're not saying don't do it, but they're saying you should really get the barometer of your customers. This was all done by magazine Capterra, Molly Burke, Senior Analysis. So what did tech tipping tip the scales? When did tip teching tip the scales into aggravating customers? So consumers are dealing with the sticker shock caused by inflated menu prices, which in turn has driven up the gratuity naturally. They have also noticed restaurants are bumping up their minimum suggested tip percentages over the past year. If you've gone out, you've noticed it. It's basically, used to be 10%, 15%, 20%. Now it's like 15, 18, 20, 25, 30. These seems to be your options now. So what may bother consumers even more than the upwardly climbing tip prompts at restaurants is the fact that they are now being asked to tip at a host of businesses in and outside of the restaurant industry where they feel tips are not earned. Checkout tablets are now ubiquitous at fast food and quick serve restaurants, though only 43% of those surveyed are willing to tip for counter service. And I heard somebody chime in about that, and it's a totally legitimate opinion. You know, if you're just at a McDonald's or a Chick-fil-A and you're getting something from the drive-thru, I don't think tipping should be an option. I don't think it really should be something that you want to do. And if you're so hell-bent on leaving a tip, carry some cash in your pocket and go ahead and give them cash, you know. So very few consumers are willing to tip for takeout and drive-thru orders. So for those folks who said they don't like to tip, you're not alone when it comes to takeout and drive-thru orders. Within the past year, over half of consumers have encountered tip screens at businesses that hadn't previously asked for tips, like retail stores, gas stations, and even ticket counters. And I've noticed this too. I'm like, sometimes you go in and it's like, wow, really? You want a tip? Now, when I lived in Vegas, I gotta be honest, pretty much tipped everybody because everybody thinks they're Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, and you know, I tip my dry cleaner. It's just, there's a whole cultural thing out there in Vegas where it's just like, you know, if somebody gives you good service, you tip them. Anyway, but not in general, and definitely understand people who say that they don't feel like they should tip. I don't want to tip somebody just for wringing up my pants. I don't want to tip somebody just because, you know, they took my credit card and I bought a Red Bull or whatever. And ticket counters, that's an interesting one. You know, we're already getting hit with those service fees and all that other stuff, which we went into. The majority were even prompted to tip at unmanned self-checkout kiosks. And a third of that group actually left a tip. And that goes to my next point, which is people want to do the right thing. And, you know, when you show a screen with a tip, you kind of feel like, if I don't leave anything, usually I'll leave something. And if I usually leave something, I'll go ahead and leave more. And it's really starting to fatigue a lot of people out there. And it's definitely understandable. The bottom line is that most customers are becoming frustrated about being asked for more money in and more venues than a year ago. So first and foremost, restaurants should take note that the majority of customers are only willing to tip for table service or food delivery. If it's delivery, if it's table service, 99.9% of people don't have a problem tipping for that. It's something we've been doing for a while. For any level of service below that, including self-pickup, takeout, drive-thrus, and counter service, far fewer than half of consumers are willing to tip. So the majority of your customers most likely don't want to tip for those services. So if somebody was asking that question, that should be a clue for you right there about what you should do. While that doesn't mean these types of restaurants shouldn't ask for tips, it does mean they should expect to receive less than the industry standard 20% for every customer. And that's something I normally do. Some of these, I don't have a problem leaving $2 or $3. Somebody makes me a coffee, something like that, $1, $2, depending. I get 4 coffees. It's almost like going to the bar. I order a beer, whatever, or drink. I leave $1, $2, $5, whatever it may be. So basically what they're saying is they don't have a problem. They just don't feel like I'm going to leave that normal 20%. Second, businesses need to take seriously consumers' concern that minimum suggested tips will continue to rise. Consumers still want to feel like their tip was earned, not that they're being hustled out of more money because it's trendy for businesses to push for bigger tips with screens. And I'll defend the businesses here. A lot of the businesses that, like I said, if I'm a restaurant here and I'm letting my employees basically put a tip screen on there and I've got a similar business over there and I'm not using the tip screen and I'm an employee that's looking to work, which one do you think I'm going to gravitate towards? Obviously the one that has a tip screen. So, if it becomes cultural in the industry for people to do it, then you kind of have no choice. That being said, there is another element that we were talking about before is when does it hit the point where people are going to stop coming to your restaurant or coming to your service, coming to your business because they're going to feel guilted into leaving a tip and maybe they just don't feel like it's warranted. And I totally understand that. So here's another big point. If tech tipping continues, we will likely see a backlash from consumers. That could mean that more consumers will opt out of tipping or will tip less money. Consumers may even avoid businesses that ask for tips when they feel it's not appropriate. The most important thing to note here is which consumers are most affected by tip fatigue. Wealthy consumers who tend to leave the largest tips. That was huge. So surveyed consumers earning 6-figure incomes and above are much more likely than lower earners to tip 20% or more. Makes sense. They make more money. They're willing to tip more. These wealthy consumers are also significantly more likely to have felt manipulated into tipping on a screen recently, to feel pressured to tip for poor service, and to say they're being asked for tips too often. Businesses need to consider whether it's worth losing their highest paying customers over tipping fatigue. And that's huge. Are you willing to lose your customers or lose a few customers because you're asking for a tip or you're asking for a larger tip than is normally customary? So 65% of consumers found it easy to use tip screen. Customers will continue to tip on screen where they feel it's appropriate, but given the frustration we're seeing with tip creep, so you got tip creep, you got tipflation, and we've got tip fatigue. I think it's unlikely that they'll start tipping regularly at places like retail stores. So yeah, if I'm buying a pair of pants, I'm not tipping you, brother. But you know what? If you're bringing me food, if you're making me a coffee, even if you're at a dry cleaner and you're, giving me my dry cleaning in a nice, friendly manner, you're making sure stuff gets done. Anytime somebody goes above and beyond for me, and I guess we all have a definition of what above and beyond is, I feel it's appropriate to go ahead and give them $1 here, $2, but not 20%, not 30%. If I'm going out to a restaurant and having a full dining experience, absolutely, especially if you take good care of me. You get my friends their drinks on time, you bring the food out, you're pleasant, you check up on us, you take care of things. So love to hear your comments. Go ahead and give me your comments on how you feel about tipping. It's becoming a more and more contentious issue with this whole tech tipping thing, like I said, with the tablets and the ease of just being able to plug that line in there, and also the guilt that you feel as a consumer going into a place and feeling like you're being manipulated into leaving a tip. How do you feel about that? I'd love to hear your comments, love to get a little dialogue going here, because it is a big concern, and it's a big concern not only from the consumers, but also from the businesses that want to do the right thing by their employees, but also do not want to lose business. My name's John Brewer, Mr. Supper Club, Eat Local South Florida. I hope you like this. Please leave your comments, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Take care now. Have a great day.